Yeah, I guess that does throw a little bit of a wrinkle in things, but I think like in the end, like people would just have to pick up new skills. Like there's no way
Hmm.
around it.
Why?
I don't know,
Why Houston? Why did he not go elsewhere?
like why Houston? Yeah, I think definitely maybe a big draw is Piggy, and I'm also guessing that probably Junk talked to him a lot, and like
Where's
All
Houston going
right,
to land
hit
this
me.
year?
Houston, I had the bike helmet in the whisk broken out on me last year, and I said that Houston wasn't, or did I say that? I think it was last year. I didn't
Here
say,
comes the
or I said Houston
overcompensation.
wasn't going to be.
A little bit more hopeful for Houston with the one tank situation, right? Because, for being honest, Piggy is pretty skilled as a player, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, you could field as a counter argument that he was significantly less proficient. Let's say he was outstanding on Sigma, but that wasn't then true for all his off-tank picks, right? So in an environment where he has to cover all the tanks, how does that translate in your mind? Do you think Piggy will be like a standout player, tank player this season?
so. I think he can be a standout tank this season. So the thing I really like about Piggy is that he's like a very hard grinder, I would say.
Mm.
So like he will practice more than like any other, if he wants to, he will practice more than any other player in the league, basically. So I think he can absolutely pick up these like new characters, and also honestly, like he would off roll a lot on main tank last year when he was playing ranked. So it's not going to be like super new to him.
Mm.
My worry comes in. So my worry wouldn't come in terms of like, let's say like dive characters like Wrecking Ball and like maybe Winston. Winston is a hard character, but it's like it's very much like game flow based in the old Overwatch. So
Mhm.
I think like if you have a good read on the game, maybe you can be good at that. Now I think for like Ryan has like always been such a different hero from the rest that I get worried putting an off tank on Ryan no matter what. So
Mm.
that's like my biggest concern. I don't know like how the game is going to look, but like if for example Ryan became meta, he would definitely need to like grind that hard, and I don't know if it's enough to make up for the gap between other main tanks that potentially have experience on that. But I think like Orisa, Ball, Winston, I don't think that would be an issue. And I think one thing that Piggy was really good at was it didn't show in the matches, but his Zarya was generally like really good for most aspects of the game. So I would just say like the thing he wasn't outstanding at and did end up improving a lot at was Diva. And I think like if you look at him from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, he
Mhm.
improved like really significantly, honestly. So I would say like he does have the potential to improve. I think that for like most heroes, he can be really good at it. It's just like the Ryan is like the big question mark for me, honestly. And I don't know if that would be meta in a game like Overwatch 2 where
Right.
he doesn't have as much support.
It would take, I think, some serious, like, old timey rush down Lucio Moira, let's get on that point. Let's just push the objective,
Yeah, but
Not
even
in-
then, there's like so many mind games in it, right? So
True.
it's like still there's still that experience gap that's going to be really important.
Mm. Yeah. No, it is difficult to your point, to see Ryan maybe with at least with how we're viewing Overwatch 2 right now. And again, that comes with a lot of maybe ignorance on our behalf, but it does seem a little hard to see, Rectangle Man having a large place as it stands.
Do you think it's feasible? Because okay, so in your mind, who are like some of the best Overwatch League main tanks of all time? If you had to mention them, like give me some names.
Just overall like
Mhm.
Super Smurf.
Okay.
Do you mean like just
Let's stop right there. That's already making my point.
Oh yeah.
The
Oh yeah,
best
they're
main
specialized. Is
tank
that what you're
players,
trying to say?
yeah, the best, two of the best main tank players of all time in Overwatch League were actually successful by splitting the hero pool of the main tank. Now we are asking people to not split, but to actually take on the entire off tank role as well, right?
Yeah.
Is that too much to ask of a person?
So yes and no, because so I think this is where the problem with Overwatch 2 comes in. Like
Mm.
it is and it isn't, in the sense that, you know how I kind of mentioned, like, I don't know what you're gonna do when you have a team like Dallas and you have like two insane tank players, but one of them like molds the identity of the team versus one of them is just like overall super skilled, generally like very flexible and stuff like that.
Mm.
Like, I don't know how you're gonna make these kinds of decisions. And, it could just turn out that, for example, for that team, leaving Fearless in all the time would be the best course of action because everybody plays around him, or maybe it turns out that he's good on certain maps and Hanbin is good on certain maps. I have such a hard time like thinking about. I feel like the best teams have been able to split playtime, but I think that a lot of the teams like right under that have to make the most of what they have, right? And so they might end up having to just sort of lean on one style, if that makes sense, and just stick to one player covering the entire role so that he can get the most, reps in, the most practice. It's such a weird thing to like look at and like think about because because we've never seen anything like it before, obviously.
Mm.
Where do you land on that, Joe? Because from my point of view, we are looking at three different aspects. We're looking at soul of a team, someone that takes charge of the team. We're looking at style of a player that molds a team, like Fearless and being aggressive and whatnot. And we're looking at skill, someone like Hanbin who's like super explosive. Now, maybe also tying that into Piggy. Do you think that that's something that he can deliver?
I think Overwatch 2 is going to be open enough to allow for a lot of different possibilities. I don't think the lessons we've learned in Overwatch, the Overwatch 1 era, if we're going to kind of deem it that, are going to go by the wayside. I think there are a lot of things. Let's say this. I think Houston is in a interesting position, much like many teams that look shallow on paper, which maybe isn't necessarily fair to their player skill, that allows them to both showcase their players' skill overall, like Harsha is saying. Piggy's a lot more depth than maybe what was shown during the season, last season, pretty much. They can force things, maybe outside of the meta. They could be able to play the meta. I think in general, for Houston in particular, I don't know if I'm necessarily answering or maybe understanding the question, but I don't know that necessarily Piggy feels like the soul. It doesn't feel like he dictated too much of the style, but it was very clear that he was skilled. So I think he can kind of piece into that format, into that system, whoever ends up being that. I mean, looking at this team, I don't even know who would be. I guess the tanks tend to be, but I don't think that's always the case. Yeah, I don't think that Houston's at a loss necessarily as much as we try to compare them against a team like a Dallas, which obviously has a kind of an anxiety of wealth. It's not an embarrassment so much, but which do you play? Do you play, kind of alluding to, do you play Hanbin, who obviously is very skilled and very flexible, or do you take somebody like Fearless and plug him in? I feel like Atlanta is the same kind of circumstance where it's like, okay, yes, we have Gator. He's kind of that vocal leader. It's evident in all of the conversations that you have with this coaching staff or even with some of the players. Or do you put Hawk on the role? Like it's not an easy choice to make because both players kind of have arguments to be in that seat, right? So it's difficult to argue. I don't think Houston's. I think in a weird way they have a good thing going for them because Piggy is genuinely pretty good.
Let me ask this then, Harsha, because it's a kind of an interesting situation where when you look up from the outside at Houston, you can have two very distinct angles on this. The first one is there is one Western guy and the others are all Korean. So that dude's on the bench because why would they ever communicate in English, right? The other side is that Danteh has played in a lot of hybrid rosters, and arguably, he is the veteran on this team for sure, and he also seemed to be like the type of player that can provide the soul for a team. So, is Danteh the soul of the Houston Outlaws?
I would say probably. with like, yeah, no, you know what? I would say yes. Out of game, I would say 100% yes. I would say in game, I'm not sure. But I don't think it's maybe that important. I know that the way that Junk likes to think about the game, I think that they'll just play the best players for the meta and like the best players at any given time. And I think Danteh is a Western player. If there was a Western player that could play on a team full of Koreans, I think it would be Danteh. So I don't have honestly worries about that as much as I know a lot of other people would. I think that like, for example, if it's like Tracer Echo or something like that, I think Danteh will 100% play. Or well, obviously Danteh would play in that kind of scenario, but even like, you know, Tracer Hitscan, I think there's a good chance Danteh could play in that kind of scenario. So I think that I'm not worried that he'll like be perma benched or anything. I think that he's honestly going to be fine, and I think that he I don't know who I would call the soul on this team because they're just going to be so different from prior years.
Right.
I would think that if you're going to look at players though and look for a soul, I think it would be like Danteh or Pelican, one of those two, most likely.
Yeah. That to me feels like I would tend to agree there, where it's like, you know, given a specific meta, I feel like any of the DPS trio probably could kind of stick out as being that flag bearer, that kind of like charge leader, maybe even not necessarily leading the engagements, but you know, having a good grasp, being like the focal point, the carry, if you want to call it. I could see Merritt doing the same thing. You know, did his duty in China. Saw him kind of do some nutty things, and obviously transitioning that to Korea. But I think you sell Houston last year a little short. Like I remember starting the season, you guys had some interesting looks. So I don't think it's necessarily just that Houston is going to play specifically the meta. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a little bit more creativity than maybe Junk Buck lets on, or maybe, you know, Houston in general lets on. I feel like there is this identification of like, okay, these compositions are good, but I remember like last year, especially like I think it was, but I don't think it was the opener, but it was the game against Shock. I think it was in that first week that you guys put like Happy on Hanzo. I was like, oh, that's an interesting look. We haven't seen that just yet. I don't know if that was necessarily like the thing to do in scrims, but that was like an interesting take. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this Houston coaching staff has like the flexibility to go, okay, cool. We have Happy. Let's put him on this. Like, let's find him these angles. Like he's gonna make plays.
I actually remember why we did that. If you want the
actually, yeah, genuinely, that'd be sick.
So we were definitely at the beginning of the season. Like we were really strong just because we had practiced way more than every other team, basically. So, but I remember specifically on 2 maps, Blizzard World and Anubis. Atlanta actually had Kai on Hanzo, and we were like, shit, like these maps where he can just like take off angles and not be punished at all. Like this is actually such an insane strategy. So we like took it like a day before the match, and Happy thought it was really cool too. So then we ended up just using it against Shock. Dude, we lost that map even though Happy went off so hard.
Popped off so nasty. I remember him like it was in like Mega, like right on Anubis. You take that like left on attack, and he just would like keep. And Choi was just constantly just like, I don't know what to do. Like my attention's being pulled everywhere, and it was pretty brilliant.
Like if you just have a Hanzo on top of you and you have like limited defense matrix and no way of like controlling him, it's so hard to play against.
It's obnoxious, and that's where I'm just like, okay, cool. Like even if that's not necessarily Junk or yours or the coaching staff's idea, the ability to kind of be quick on your feet and identify, okay, cool, like that's good. Like we can see that that's clearly strong, and like maybe we can pilot that. Maybe we can take that into our repertoire. That's where I look at this Houston team, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like maybe. I mean, we kind of have to wave our hands in the air and say we don't know what to do with Tank, but Piggy's skilled enough that he can kind of probably cover most of the role, you know, bar none, or at least at a, you know, league average level. And then you look at this DPS trio, you look at the supports. Granted, you know, there's no main support, but there again, is it that not that hard? But you know, it's I think there's a lot of like holes that people are pointing towards that can be remedied, I think, easier than people would imagine.
I agree with that, and I think one thing that people also need to think about is filling all those holes worth it. And what I mean by that is, okay, so yeah, you would cover more things having. I'm gonna name like 2 players that are very outstanding on certain roles. So like, let's say you have Moth and you have Ben Best on this, or you know, FD God and Ben Best, something like that, right, on this team. is it worth having extra players who you're gonna have to split extra scrim time with, and then suddenly, people are not necessarily as comfortable with, go in just for the possibility of like sometimes you'll play different things on different maps, right? But you won't play it necessarily. You won't have the same cohesion necessarily because
Mhm.
you're not getting as much practice together. Like I think that there's both a benefit and a cost to filling all these holes, right? And the cost is that you're not going to build the same kind of synergy you would have just playing the same 5 to 6 players every single map, right? So I don't know. I think that it is a little bit overblown in some senses. I also think, dude, I don't think using a flex support on Lucio is as tragic as people think. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think that people really overblow it, and like I've had like Lucio players like look at flex supports and be like, "Oh, that guy's actually pretty good." So I don't think that it's as tragic, and I think that flex supports are almost you know almost every time better than main supports at Brig. Like I think it's like silly how much better flex supports are at Brig than
Hmm.
main. So I think like it's really not as tragic as people think. I just think that Ryan is like the one thing that I
Yeah.
will always have a concern about.
Mm. Okay,
Are
so
you concerned? Granted, we haven't necessarily seen it just yet. But is like Doomfist moving to tank kind of a weird like?
Oh, you're right about that.
Is that a weird one? I mean, I think that's just going to be a weird one for most flex tanks in general. But
Dude, we might see DPS. If Doomfist is like perma meta on certain maps, maybe a DPS plays it. That'd be kind of fun.
I think I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
If it's like rigid in the way that it's just like this is the Winston meta, we just play Winston every map, every sub map, every point. Like we don't change it, we don't deviate away from it. It's just Winston, and we just replace that Winston name with the Doomfist name. Then you can probably see somebody like maybe Sparkle or maybe Mirror come out and lead
Yeah.
those charges. I don't know, maybe Pelican. I don't know.
Yeah, one of Pelican or Danteh. Maybe Danteh just to like calm more. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I don't know. Dang, that'd be so funny just seeing like 3 and 2 supports playing. But yeah, I guess that does throw a little bit of a wrinkle in things. But I think like in the end, like people would just have to pick up new skills. Like there's no way
Mhm.
around it because they're just gonna. Well, hopefully they're gonna be releasing new heroes. I don't really know actually. So
Sure.
so it's just gonna be that same kind of thing.
Mm.
It's just that other people have a head start on that hero already. So that's all.
okay, so that's one thing we got to talk about with Houston that I think bears pointing out because I talked to a bunch of people this offseason and they were like, man, after that season, like we were really trying to get Pelican. Couldn't do it, man. Like, couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea why Houston, out of all places, got to get Pelican on the roster? Which, honestly, is probably going to be a huge boost to them this year, right?
Yeah. I mean, even when I was like I did help, I guess, for not very much, but like the first few weeks of off season, I kind of had a good feeling that Pelican was probably coming to Houston. Like even then, I think I don't think he wanted to be necessarily in Atlanta anymore, and I don't know necessarily why, but I think that part of the reason he probably came to Houston is like he thought that the roster was going to be good. Part of the reason might have been Piggy, honestly, because he and Piggy are very close friends. Um, I think it was just like sorry, you asked like
Why?
I don't know like
Why Houston? Why did he not go elsewhere?
why Houston. Yeah, I think definitely maybe a big draw is Piggy, and I'm also guessing that probably Junk talked to him a lot and like probably got the buy-in of Pelican. So I think pretty good reasons. I think every team that looked at him probably threw him the bag. So I don't know if money was really a concern at that point.
Mm.
And I think that there's certain teams that you're gonna look at and be like, I don't have any faith in this team, even if they throw me the bag. So yeah, I'm thinking there are a few teams that probably are in that situation. If I'm if I'm let's say I'm speaking without any knowledge of the situation,
Mm.
I would say teams that if I were Pelican, I would consider are let's say Shock, let's say Gladiators, Houston, and this is Shock before proper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think you can't go wrong with any of those teams. But Danteh did go out and say that he wasn't able to make the roster moves he wanted to make, right? So let's eliminate them, and then it's between Shock and Outlaws, and Yeah, in that scenario, I guess. Yeah, I don't. I think at that point you just really need to get the buy-in of the people with, or sorry, you'd have to buy into the people on the team to
Mhm.
choose between those two, because I think you can't go wrong with either. Even though people are going to say that's silly because it's obviously Shock, but like this is not like the same Houston as like before.
Yeah.
It's just entirely different people. So at that point, I think you just have to talk to the people on the team and see which one you vibe better with. And honestly, if Shock was also pursuing proper at the time, like maybe they wouldn't have gone as hard on Pelican too. So yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think there are other teams basically that would have been options. Is what I'm kind of trying to hint at.
Yeah. Again, like we've I think we've talked about this a lot on the show, and I think it's starting to kind of bear a little bit of fruit where like franchises in general, like your past history kind of is guiding your hand a little bit more than your checkbook. Right? Team players
Also-
want to win. Period. The end. End of story. End of discussion. If you're not winning, there's not too much money you can throw at somebody to just say, "Hey, you want to come lose with us for a fat bag?" It's like, yeah, maybe in like 2 years when I want to retire. Or if it's the only offer I have, then sure. But you look at a player like Pelican, you look at a player who else was like a hot free agent, right? Like Mag last year. It's bizarre that Washington landed him, but whatever. It doesn't. It goes without saying that as we continue with esports, not even just in Overwatch, or just in esports in general, like orgs that like just constantly fuck up, and don't really try to remedy things, or don't really try to like clean the system, are not going to attract good talent. Period. And I think it speaks to your regime last year. It speaks to Junk's regime this year. Like these are good people who you want to be around, who you want to play for, who are good and have good systems. Weird. Pelican shows up here. Don't know. Seems kind of sus. Or does it?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think the trajectory definitely helps. Like, let's say a year before last year, I don't think Pelican would have joined Houston. I think
Sure.
like cleaning up the reputation is what
Mhm.
is probably like the deciding factor.
Yep. I'm sure the salary is comparable to what he was offered, but again, I speak with negative knowledge. I don't talk to anybody, guys. Let's be honest. That said, is Houston throwing the bag, after Beasley? I don't know. Me thinks not, but there again, who knows, right? I'm sure it was comparable. I can't imagine it was like the top offer, right?
Yeah,
I think there's a
wasn't.
lot of intangibles. Right, exactly.
I think there's a certain team that was always the top offer in
I wonder. I wonder.
Okay, there's one guy I want to talk about, because I think the general feedback I've gotten so far is that we've the saturation of hit scan players in this league is now nutty, right? Like, even if you think through the worst starter, you still think that's a pretty good player. Like, if you go through all the teams, right? Like, what is it, like Shax or something? You're towards like the bottom end, which is crazy to think, but tell me someone who's worse, clearly, as a starter, right? And then I think Merritt is not the first choice for Houston, but I'm not 100% sure. What do you think about Merritt generally? Was that someone who you were looking at before? Like, was that something where you looked at scrims, went like, oh yeah, I'm interested. Okay, he's not 18 yet. I guess next year. Did he ever turn ahead for you?
So I will say the two people I didn't have input on going into the team this year were Merritt and Lastro. I actually didn't really discuss them. So what I will say about Merritt is that I didn't watch too much of him during 2021. I will say during 2020 though, I heard like insane rumors coming out from Korea, especially going up to grand finals. I heard people telling me that Merritt was like destroying teams, that he was better than like a lot of the OWL players. And I think he was actually of age for season 4 of OWL.
Really?
I might be wrong about this.
Okay. If that's the case, then yeah.
Maybe I should check this. I don't want to speak out of my ass. So he's 19 right now.
Wow.
June 20. Okay, he would have. I think he would have.
Mid-season?
No, he was always of age. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So I think he actually could have signed with a team last year, and I actually am sort of unsure why he didn't. I think Happy is insane, so I don't think we were looking at him. But I think that Actually, I have no idea why he didn't sign with a team because after what I had heard, I know that the community tends to be a little bit lower on him. I didn't watch too much of him on O2, so I can't really like speak to that. So I will say that one of those teams that did scrim him when he was popping off was Shock when Junkbook was on it, and then I'll also say that they probably did have somewhat of like a trial process for him. So I'm guessing they trust him. I don't know if he's going to be the best hit scan in the league, but I've heard that he has a very high ceiling. So
Yep.
yeah, I won't give like a very strong opinion on that just because I haven't watched enough of him from 2021.
Nice.
Same.
Now, Joe.
Yeah, that's kind of yes. Hello.
I need a strong opinion and also being mindful of the time. Where's Houston
All right,
going to land
hit
this
me.
year?
Houston, I had the bike helmet in the whisk broken out on me last year, and I said that Houston wasn't, or did I say that? I think it was last year. I didn't say, or I said Houston wasn't going to be, huh?
Here comes the overcompensation.
Oh yeah, here comes the overcompensation. Yeah. I didn't believe. I was not, of the faith. I thought they were going to place outside of the top 5. They didn't. They did, but I was proven wrong, so I didn't. You get it. Hopefully, if you don't, leave a comment. What will exactly bait the engagement? What will Houston do? I think this team's growing on me in general. I think the more that I look at teams, the more that I am siding with the lean and mean, especially for the first season of Overwatch 2. I think NA, they will do well. I think there are metas that I can see them probably win a stage title. So I'm going to say potential summer winners. I don't remember what tournament that would be, if I'm going to be completely honest. I know that we did some naming convention changes. It's still a summer showdown, so that works. Probably, yeah. I guess with the late start date, it's mid-season. I could see Houston jumping out in front, doing some big things. Maybe some finals appearances. Maybe mid-season finals appearance. Again, given looking at merit, looking at what I know from him from 2019. Granted, I know that he kind of slowed down in 2020. Knowing what Pelican can do, knowing what Piggy can do, obviously knowing what Danteh can do. God knows how long he's been playing this godforsaken game.
Too long.
Far too long. I mean, Jesus. And God bless him for it, because we need people. But I think Houston genuinely has a good team. I don't think the holes are as bad as people expect them to be. And I think any of the blanket problems are going to be blanket problems for everybody and not just Houston. So like Harsha said, the Rhine, the Doomfist, these things that everybody are going to have to, adapt to. Maybe Sojourn, maybe a new hero, maybe Orissa's meta. God knows what she's playing like these days, right? Like that's the stuff that everybody's going to have to solve. It's not a Houston problem initially or solely.
Right. I still need a placement, Joe, real quick.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Give me a spot.
A place.
A lot of words for someone that doesn't put a number there.
Yeah, right.
A range, right? We're still doing our power rankings, but
yeah, I'll say. Oh, that's tough. I'll say top 5 NA, and I'm fighting the cop out. I'll say top 8 international.
Okay, Harsha.
Right now.
So I'll say the floor is top 5 NA. I think that they'll be. I think that's the worst they could be. I think that Gladiator, Shock, Dallas, and Houston and Rain would be those 5. I don't think anyone's going to break that 5, honestly. I think that their ceiling is they could win tournaments. It just depends on the meta, I think. So I'll give them. I'll say they'll have 1 to 2 deep tournament runs, but I'll say their floor is top 5 NA.
Right. I guess as to add my sauce to this, the thing is how this is developing currently, also based on scrim bugs, really reminds me of last year. And now I'm like, am I scared? Because if we're being honest, right? Like, I don't know how Piggy will be able to cover all the hero pools, and maybe like Houston.
He's fucking good. That's why.
Once again, will be like great in the metas the way he can play. Then you don't have a main support. I'm not sure how that translates into that situation, but apparently we're currently playing a lot of double flex support. So like how much of the potential is being tested, right? I think still that they are likely to land top 3 NA this time around.
Top 3, interesting. I'm again, folks at home, YouTube, audio listeners, bookmark that and see what the power rankings show, because I'm suspect to change what those top 3 teams look like. If that rocks out, they will change. If the Scrimbucks, this boy cannot make a unique decision. He has no genuine thoughts, no creativity sparks within him. He is German after all, and he needs his hand held at all times.
No, dude, if I'm on the hype train for a team and I see there's a cliff coming and the bridge is not intact, I'm jumping over to the next train. Watch me pivot, dude.
No loyalty.
You're a train hopper, you.
Zero loyalties.
No, I think they're definitely going to be strong. I think that
I agree.
I honestly think that they'll be like a sleeper pick, because I think that like people are just valuing things that I think won't be important, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and we'll shift those. Those lenses will shift once people get a hold of the game. I think people.
Or I'll be wrong. That could also be true.
Hey, possible.
But I don't think so.
Right. I guess that concludes our Houston talk.